Welcome to the George Thomas Clark podcast. It's my pleasure today to introduce you to Ken Lambert. How you doing, Ken?
Hi, Tom. I'm doing as good as you can in this time of craziness, but good. Thank you.
Okay.
You?
I'm doing pretty well, too. I am, as you alluded to, getting a little bit of cabin fever, being hunkered down daily, 24 hours a day, except going to the market. When going to the market is the highlight of life, it does make things less.
Me too. Me too. I love going to the market.
Yeah, I mean, I make it a very long trip and check out products I'd never checked out before. Now, we're going to hone in on your location, Ken. You don't have to tell us right now, but Ken is a guy I've known since junior high school and in Sacramento, California. And even then, Ken was a traveler. Thereafter, I know he lived I hear Lambert is living here and there, Mexico City, twice in Australia, twice in Bangkok, Thailand, New York City, Madrid, Miami. And last I heard is Park City, Utah. I guess you're a neighbor of Robert Redford. Can you tell us where in the world you're living right now?
Well, first, Mr. Clark, it's a little scary that you know that much.
Well,
I've been trying to keep on the move since I was in second grade. But, yeah, I'm living in Park City. I came back a couple years ago to get my ankle operated on, serious operation, and be with my sons for a bit. And so my next goal geographically is to move back to Spain. I lived there for 7 years in Madrid, and my hope is, and it's not working out very well with this bloody corona stuff, but is to go up to Galicia and study cooking, culinary things, and write and roll around on the streets of Balboa.
Well, I'd like to commend you for your pronunciation. I think it's a Castilian pronunciation when you said Galicia, kind of the TH on the C sound. So, seriously, Barcelona,
No,
cinco cerveza, and so forth. So you must have learned to speak
No,
Spanish
I'm gay. I'm gay, and that's I'm gay, and that's how I speak. But actually, Ferdinand, King Ferdinand, in the 14th century, had a lisp, and so that manifested in people wanting, like Donald Trump, to copy him, or some people, and so they Barcelona, la 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 la, and people say you're being an idiot to talk like that, because I know Mexican and some other dialects of American or Latina dialogues, but so anyway, that's a consequence of Galicia.
Right. I know. I was just saying, as a guy who speaks a bit of Spanish himself, I did notice that. I've been to Madrid once for about a week. I was looking toward perhaps moving there, and I still really haven't ruled it out. I was appalled. Now, I was there in 2011. I don't know when you were last there, but was it like this? Was it like the following when you were there? I would take a walk in downtown Madrid, and the prostitutes would accost me. Did you? When were you there, and was the place just overrun with prostitutes?
Oh man, I was there. The last time I was physically there was about just before my surgery, and I have students and many or a few dear friends, and it was not bad. I was down south, and I went up north and back to Madrid, but it's it's a country in turmoil and crisis, and it's, these guys are really getting smacked right now, big time.
Oh, by the coronavirus, yes. It's devastating. Spain, Italy, France, and the highest in the world death rate is Belgium. So,
no.
Yeah, Yeah, it's number one for
Really?
deaths per 1 million.
Ratio, yeah.
More than 700. And then, of course, we in the United States have 2.5 times more deaths than any other country. The British now are number 2 in the world. So the English-speaking people perhaps have screwed up in ways that some of the other folks did not.
The great call.
Why do you have any particular theory about why we and the people in the UK have not quite done as well shutting this down as some other countries?
Because we have poor leadership.
Yes, I would agree with that. The Donald is not among the more astute or scientific individuals. You might remember.
You want to take some Lysol, it's cool.
Yeah, just inhale that Lysol. I had to write a little piece about that, vertical prose I call it, and not only that. A couple of weeks before that, Trump was saying that every scientist and doctor he talked to commended him for his scientific brilliance, and he attributes that to inheriting it from his uncle, who used to teach at MIT.
Well, there you go. He's right.
Yeah, I think somewhere in the genetic link it didn't work out. Okay, now you've worked all over the world. And I know you've been in advertising and writing related to advertising and administration. Can you tell, I'm sure a lot of people would like to go and live all over the world. What were some of the things that you did? What kind of jobs did you have overseas? How did you get them, and how did they work out?
Well, I don't know if you remember, but I wrote my first significant essay as a sophomore in Encina, where you and I both matriculated from, and by some miracle, I won a I don't know what you call it, a scholarship to go to Wolfsburg, Germany. And it was from the Nilo family that was sponsoring this, and so I went there. I went there as a 16-year-old, and the family that I stayed with. Harold Newman, and he came and stayed with my family, and so it was that, and it was 4 months, and so that was my first real taste of global or international living, and then I went to Mexico for spring break, and then got a job in New York with a big ad agency, and then they sent me to Spain, and then I went to Australia. I went to Spain for 5 years with my girlfriend, and who became my wife and my kid's mother, and happy Mother's Day, baby. And then to Thailand, and I ran our Thai office, and then I started my own company, and then moved to Mexico, sold it, moved to Mexico, then back to the United States in San Antonio, then back to Sydney. And then I came to lovely Park City, and now I want to go back to Spain. So that's it.
Now, Ken, I don't believe you mentioned Bakersfield. You haven't lived in Bakersfield?
No, but I've raced down there. It's one of my favorite places.
Yeah, it's an awesome place. I've only been here 29 years, so it's no big deal. I don't know how a kid growing up in Sacramento ends up in Bakersfield, but I will say this: it's close to L.A., so I've been to L.A. far more times than I otherwise would have been. So that's
well, I admire you for many reasons. You're a great athlete, and you're a killer writer. But you teach, and teaching's very important to me. I've been teaching a long time, and I think it's one of the most noble professions.
Well, I agree. It is, and it's very satisfying, and that's a nice segue into our next subject, and that is your long martial arts career. I can remember back in the 1960s at Encina High, in Sacramento, you were already into it, already proficient. And then in the early 70s, I was talking to some guys who were into martial arts, and they were saying, hey, Ken Lambert just got his black belt, and he's really good. How old were you when you started martial arts? And I know you competed. What are some of the highlights of your involvement in martial arts?
Do you have a few hours?
Yeah, I was going to say that's a bit of
a... I remember I started up at Ed Parker School, Kempo Karate on Fulton Avenue, when I was about 8 years old. And the reason I did that is because I wanted to kill my third grade teacher, Mr. Miles. That name may resonate with you, but and soon got over that. But much to my mom and dad's disdain, I really got into it, and they drove me everywhere. My mom did. So I studied with them, and then I moved to a school called Tracy's, right down the street, actually, on Fulton. And I was a purple belt, and I was teaching. So I taught the little kids and the old people. And it was like, this sucks, except I'm really getting good at basics, the fundamental, the blocks, the kicks, the stances, the adrenaline, the philosophy, the respect. Anyway, so I was doing that, and then I met Al Dacascos, Sifu Al, my Sifu, and down in San Francisco. I went down to see Bruce Lee and met him, but I met Dacascos, and I could not believe how good this guy is. So, by coincidence, I got a soccer scholarship to the University of Denver, and when we graduated, Tom, and so I went there because that's where Dacascos was now based. And, one thing led to another, and I've been with him for 50 years. Anyway, I've done a lot of stuff. I've studied 10 different martial arts, and I love them. And I've studied ballet, and I love ballet and dance. And, my body's a wreck.
Well, I've had to. Basketball was my sport, and I wouldn't even dream of playing it anymore because at some point I had to say, I'm either going to give up my hips or I'm going to give up jumping. And but there are earthbound aspects to the martial arts, though, that I imagine you can do that would not include, say, sparring.
Wait, Tom, excuse me. One of the most spectacular athletic performances I've ever seen was when we were seniors and you were on the court battling El Camino. Your brother Clint was feeding you the ball, and you sunk, I don't know how many, but, like a record. And it was like, thank you for the compliment, but he was back at you.
Well, I appreciate that. In fairness to the Mean Green, the Eagles of El Camino, my best game, though, 41 points, came against San Juan. It doesn't matter. It was,
You just reduced the honor.
That's a little bit. But you realize, Ken, that was a half a century ago, literally. 1970.
Fuck you.
Yeah, it's scary how those years go by. Now, you mentioned Bruce Lee, the great Bruce Lee, known as Li Xiaolong in Cantonese, or I believe that would be Mandarin. What was he like back in the day? This was before his great fame.
Well, as well as you can get to know the Green Hornet in 15 minutes with, 100 other little, colored belts around you. He was impressive. She was powerful and manifested, confidence and his words. He didn't show us any martial arts. He was there for 10 minutes really, and I took my takeaway from Bruce Lee and from subsequent stuff is that, this guy was really a master, big time master now. And prolific and strong, strong.
Yeah, he was a world-class athlete. Some people who trained boxers during that era said if this guy went straight into professional boxing, he would be top 5 contender very soon after
Really
debuting. Right. So that's the kind of athleticism and upper body striking he had. And of course, he was a great kicker. Another guy that we have talked about earlier today is Ed Parker, who was a legend in martial arts and then actually became involved with Elvis Presley's group, and I suppose did some security for Elvis as well. And then sadly, I read years later, died of a heart attack while I think in his 50s.
Yeah, Sifu Parker was he's a Hawaiian, and his ohana is from there, and he came to L.A. and he became, he was the Sifu to the stars, and Presley was a horrible black belt, and so was Willie Nelson. But you got, sometimes you promote people beyond their real capacity as martial artists, but it adds such value and such integrity maybe to the art, and art is about exposure. So
yeah, I can imagine that Elvis with his and I'm a big Elvis fan, but he obviously had a huge drug problem. And being zonked out on pills, I wouldn't think that he would have been particularly athletic out there on the mat.
I don't know, but he looks like shit when I, see his videos.
Okay. Another guy I wanted to talk to you about is Joe Louis, Lewis, a very muscular, powerful martial artist who was a legend in particular in the late 60s and early 70s, got involved in kickboxing. And I know that you met Joe Louis, I'm sure, a number of times, and also met him late in life, or hosted him late in life in Bangkok as he was battling brain cancer.
Yeah, Joe's an icon, perhaps one of the top 5 contemporary fighters in the world and in history. He's just a tough guy, and he's a Marine. He came out of Okinawa. He learned hard style, karate, and unfortunately, I met him when he was dying, and he eventually did, but he was cool, and he was so good.
Yeah, very powerful, and. I can remember it's been a long time. It's hard to believe it's been 30 years. It was considered a battle of the older guys. It was more of an exhibition, but it was basically a kickboxing match between about a 47-year-old Joe Louis and Bill Superfoot Wallace, which was on TV. And you can still get it on YouTube. Well, I think they called it a draw. Wallace felt he had an edge. Louis said that he held back, because Louis was the larger, more powerful man. So I think I would have given him the edge if it had been an all-out.
Well, Tom, I know them both, and I've played with them in the ring, and Wallace a lot. And I can tell you, Wallace would kick Joe's ass in a tournament fight. Joe Louis would just rip Wallace's head off in a street fight.
Well, yeah, I was referring to full contact kickboxing rather than tournament karate, or for that matter, the street. Who do you think would win in a kickboxing match?
Well, Tom, first of all, back in the day, back in the 70s, everything was full contact. If you were kind, you taped your hands. That's it, with adhesive tape, and you had 4 judges and a ref in the middle, and but it went berserk from the first second, and that was full contact. Then you went through all the gloves, all the protection equipment, then you get back to the ring, where we are now, which is like, God, brutal. Thank God I didn't ever have to do that. And the whole, I think, except the fundamentals for martial arts has changed, including your interest in Holyfield, and Tyson.
Yeah, it's changed. I like to think back occasionally about some of these old masters that we've just talked about, and put them where they might not want to be, because it's a brutal sport. But I'm talking about mixed martial arts. Can you imagine Bruce Lee in the 135-pound division, Joe Louis in the 205-pound division, for example? I think they would both be terrific, not only at punching and kicking, but grappling.
Not grappling so much. I mean, grappling really came in with the Tracy's down in Brazil. I mean, that's when jiu-jitsu's been going on for a long time in Japan and other places. But when mixed martial arts got going, you had to have a ground game. You had to, because it almost always ends up on the ground, and you needed to know how to get arm bars on and leg locks and chokeholds and stuff like that, because if you didn't, you were going to be choked out. And so anyway, that was kind of a new addition to mixed martial arts. And so boxing is an integral part of fighting. But you can't move side to side and back and forth, and you can't use, 4 points on your punches, roundhouse, overhand, uppercut, and you can't use them fast, and you can't use them in flow, fluidly. Then, that's it.
Now, I think those listening have probably inferred that we're in our late 60s. I'm 67 and a half. I believe you turned 68 a short while ago. So, as such, you're probably no longer sparring. I'm presuming that. What are you doing in martial arts right now, and what aren't you doing?
I'm trying to relearn how to walk again. I have 5 pins and 3 less bones in my ankle from fighting and kicking and kicking and kicking. And that's it. I don't, I have students, and I want to mentor them, but I'm not fighting. Man, I'm never going to fight again for sure.
Well, that's good. That's good. And you just mentioned a couple of guys who I don't think should be fighting. I think hitting the bag, hitting the gloves, the mitts, Mike Tyson and Evander Holyfield. Tyson is 53, Holyfield is 57. Did you get a chance to click on that link of Tyson in a recent workout hitting the mitts?
No, I didn't, but I was very surprised and impressed when you told me that his hands look good. He's, slimmed down. For me, the ultimate nightmare is Mike Tyson pissed off in a bar.
That would be very unpleasant.
Wait. Let me just tell you a quick story. I'm a pretty small white boy from a, middle class family. So my Sifu, Al, in Denver said, before you get your black belt, this is 1971, you have to work at Mr. Lucky's in Denver, which is one of the badass bars in town. And it was, all my Ohana, like 5 guys worked there. So one day I worked it, and I wear a cup. I take my nunchakus. I'm like, oh my God. And Lyle Alzado, who's, you know who he is, right?
Oh, yes, a great defensive end. Denver and later with the Raiders.
Exactly. So, and a bad motherfucker. I tell you, steroided out. So he comes in. He parks his vet in the parking lot of Mr. Lucky's. Comes in, goes to the bar, and gets drunk. So everyone's we have to throw him out. He's really hassling people. So the guys, my brothers, they say, you throw him out. This is the only way you're going to get your black belt. So I went over to the bar, on the shoulder, and he growled. And I whispered in his ear, and I said, Mr. Alzado, there's two guys outside scratching your car with keys. He roared again and rised like a phoenix and ran out, and we locked the door behind him and called the cops. And so that was was how I got my block.
That is the most magnificent martial arts exhibition imaginable, because you mentioned the terror of Tyson in a bar. Lyle Alzado would have been little more fun in that regard. So you handled it quite well. He was a big man.
Tom, excuse me. There's nothing fun about fighting. There's nothing fun about violence. It's just, it sucks. And one of the things about Corona is that we have a chance to change the paradigm of our humanity. We can do so much now. I mean, the death and the misery and all that's horrible, but think about it, man. We can change the environment. We can do so much. Yeah? If man can.
Well, we're certainly facing a challenge like I've never seen in my life. We've had various challenges. The Vietnam War comes to mind, AIDS. But this is certainly a horrific battle that we're facing, because this disease, while it doesn't kill as high a percentage as certain other diseases, such as AIDS, it's far more contagious than...
Well, Tom, I think it's the interesting key fact in this pandemic is that it's global. Everyone's in the same boat. Wait, I talked to my girlfriend, and Africa's screwed. Russia, wait till they really report the numbers. It's like, okay, so let's reboot. Let's, reset. Let's use this time as a catalyst to rethink ways that we're dealing. You can create a new environment. We've just proven it. You can see Mount Fuji from 50 miles away. It's amazing. You can see Los Angeles. So I don't know. I hope we use this time productively.
Now, one way you've been using your time even more than normally, and I as well, is by doing even more writing. You mentioned you're writing several hours a day. Are you working on some of your first-person pieces? Are these nonfiction, or half and half, or all fiction?
Well, first, my writing is my dope. I had to give up drinking and everything else, and this is the thing I love the most, besides my children.
Okay, so
I don't know how to answer that question.
Well, that's fine.
I love to write, and I've been paid very well to write 3-word headlines. I've written 300. I don't know how many commercials, and writing short is hard, but writing long is hard too.
Yeah, it's even harder, because if it brings the same intensity and polish per word, it takes longer and longer. A lot of us who know you have read with admiration your story about Jim Morrison, the great lead singer from the Doors. You met him in the summer of 1970, right out of high school. I know we've got music fans of all ages who would like to hear a little bit about that.
No one's going to believe it, but I was hitchhiking around Europe in the summer of 1970. I got into an accident. I cut my finger really badly in Belgium, and ended up in Paris, with a lady, Madame Sprock, a really beautiful older lady, and she took me into her home, and anyway, got me on the ferry over to Gatwick, and so my sister was an airline stewardess, and she gave me a ticket, so I got to go into first class, and there was a strike going on with Pan American, and so I'm in the bar, I have a bottle of Percodan, and I'm in so much pain. I've had 44 stitches in my little finger, go figure. And this hairy guy next to me looks at my finger and goes, "Looks like you have a corn dog on your finger." And he goes, "I'll buy you a drink." And so you didn't have to buy a drink that time. But so we start shooting the shit. And, I'm in so much pain, I don't care who he is, but he's cool, and he liked me. And so then my sister's friend comes up. She's a stewardess for Pan. She goes, "You got to get in the car. You got to get in the plane. You're going to take off in the John, in the WC, and you're going to have to walk around for, 12 hours as we get home, but this is the last flight out of London." So we run down the ramp and into the plane, which, would be shot for today, but, and she locks me in the John. 20 minutes later, no, an hour later, knock. Okay, the guy you were talking to in the bar said you can take off and land because he has 2 seats in first class. And so I go back and, his name's Jim. And we sit down and, I had already given him half my painkillers because he was crazy. And so long story short, in 747s back then, you could go upstairs and there was a little piano. And I played the piano and he sang, as you know. We wrote 12 songs or poems, and I still have them hanging on my wall. And anyway, it was quite an experience.
How was Jim singing on the plane? Because he suffered a lot because of his abuse of alcohol and tobacco in particular. Heroin killed him later on, but as of the summer of 1970, had you found out that he was Morrison at the time you heard him sing, or not?
I went 5 hours before I knew who he was, and that made the deal. I mean, we became friends. He said, because I got to L.A. and his girlfriend picked him up with a few friends, and he said, "You just want to sleep in our studio couch. I sleep there all the time. And you're welcome." And he said, you may even be able to jam tomorrow if John, the drummer, is cool with that. And that's a long story, Tom. And, I said, "No, I want to try to seduce my sister's friend." And that was one of the biggest mistakes of my life.
Yeah, well, at least you met the great Jim Morrison, who remains one of my all-time favorite singers, one of the top handful. And so, Ken, we'd like to thank you very much for your always entertaining commentary about your life and world matters. And I believe you said the next place you're going to live is probably back in Spain, in Galicia.
Yeah, or Cordona. Yeah, up the north, where the seafood's the best.
Do you have a time frame for that?
Does God have a time frame for Coronas? Yeah, as soon as I can go, I'm going.
Well, that's good. Be careful about such things. I mentioned my almost 3 decades in Bakersfield. When I arrived here in 1991, I thought, all right, I'm only going to live here a year or two max. So, but of course, those things tend to snowball for, say, the more mundane individuals like myself. But I'm sure that you are not going to be tied down anywhere longer than you want to be.
Well, Tom, I admire you a lot for your creativity and also your empathy. I just mentioned that, but all our lives are different. The things that we need most are be kind and be smart, and we have a chance to do that again. So, anyway, thank you very much for your interest, and God bless you, and be safe.
Okay, Ken. Thank you.